Alrighty. Good afternoon. My name is Davis Rowe. I'm a freshman business administration major from Atlanta, Georgia. And this is my presentation on chapter two of the history of black business in America, the book. Okay, so let's begin with context to the transatlantic slave trade. Prior to the transatlantic slave trade, nations in Africa specialized in all different kinds of agriculture. They grew many crops such as yams, I want to say millet, sorghum, and other staples. They traded locally and across regions, and Africa also had very well established trade routes that allowed nations like Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, I could be pronouncing that wrong. I apologize if I am, to connect with North Africa and the Mediterranean. Kingdoms became major trade hubs so that the economy really was able to flourish throughout the continent. I'm sorry. And so this allowed for not countries, but this was the foundation for African nations and their black people to have businesses. Okay, so just after the Emancipation Proclamation, many freed slaves worked to create small enterprises in agriculture and trade. During this time, many business owners had to overcome different challenges such as systemic racism, limited access to capital, social exclusion, and many more things. Communities came together to support businesses that created economic resilience for black people. Chapter 2 of the history of black businesses in America also briefly covers the work that Madam C.J. Walker did in creating a cosmetics empire. And to this day, black people work in the cosmetics empire, whether that's skincare, hair care, and so much more. You know, you can find your best hairstylist could be your neighbor down the street who just so happens to be a black woman. Okay, so let's continue with some myths. Black businesses only came out during the civil rights movement. That's obviously a myth because originally they were flowing well in Africa much, much prior to the transatlantic slave trade. Okay. And another one, businesses only cater to black customers. This clearly isn't true because they have contributed to the much greater economy, the grand economy, wherever they are, whether it's United States, Europe, Africa, Asia, wherever we are, we always are contributing to the greater economy. We are in diverse sectors, including agriculture, manufacturing, and services. You know, these services could include the industry, the food industry, agriculture, farming, all of that contributes to the economy and how black people weren't just doing things just for black people, because business is business. Next, let's talk about culture. You would think that after, people were taken and enslaved in the Americas and not participated, but went through the slave trade, that they would lose their culture and lose and forget about who they are as people. But there are cultural practices that were carried on through time. So we have the communal support and cooperation that helped the black businesses flourish. So people in the community would always come together and support each other. Family kinship also had been passed down through generations. This allowed for networks to be created to go against systemic barriers set in place. As heritage was also passed down through generations, through celebrations and rituals and not whatever else, excuse me, all the other events that happened, this has allowed people to learn and continue their families' legacies. Okay, so let's talk about the economic and money side of the black businesses in America from chapter two. Further expanding on the economic exploitation, there was definitely discriminatory practices that were put in place, such as redlining and restricting covenants. So this is when people were denied loans and insurance because of where they lived and who they were who they were based off their ethnicity. This also meant that there were limitations to people of this also meant that there were limitations to people of color based off where they wanted to live. They couldn't live in certain places because certain places had good, economics and resources.